The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in and making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro.
My next Lana-ism, there are a few of these on Twitter, or on X, is othering. There's a thing going on where you have the sports team mentality, and that's me slapping my papers because, I have my notes being who I am. Othering is a thing where you just take a whole group of people and you go, those people over there. In order to make a point, or in order to get something done, or in order to justify something, you're looking at a bunch of people and you're throwing them together. There's some related stuff here. The phrase not all. So let's say some woman says, well, men do this, men do that. And don't get me wrong, I hate absolute statements, so I don't like that either. I don't think we're going to change the vernacular. I don't think we're going to be able to make any kind of linguistic change to a group being spoken about without exceptions, because I believe people are just too lazy to do it. You say, well, cops are doing this and cops are doing that. Well, not all cops. And that's true. Not all cops. So we have to understand, previous to go into any group that we're talking about, that not all people in that group are the thing that is being complained about. If we can handle that and take that into 2024 so that that's a given, so that the argument isn't always, well, not all, because we kind of know, and not believe me, I'm just as guilty of this as anybody else, because I can't stand anything that doesn't have an exception in it. To me, everything is case by case. And I'm going to say really quickly that I believe that human race does not like case by case. It's just too late. It's too much work for them. Nobody wants to ever look at anything at a case-by-case basis. It's just extremely tedious for anybody to think of anything like that. So, there's no one group of people, no matter what group you can come up with in your head, that are all this one way and that's it. Other than people that have died, those people are still dead. That's the only thing you can maybe come up with. Those people, or people that haven't been born yet, those people aren't here yet. That's it. But you can't take one group of any type of people and just throw one cause at them or one complaint at them and make it stick, because there's too many people that have differences within any group of people. There are always exceptions, and there's always a range of people. So not all, and again, let's say I'm complaining about men, I'll always complain about a specific type of men, because I know that all men are not bad and all men are not this or all men are not that, right? But other people don't disclaim that for whatever reason, or they're in the middle of their rant, and so they say things the way they say them. And to stop and say, well, not all, let's take all of the really good men out there and let's separate them from the herd. Say we're talking about the rest of them. If you're not the person they're complaining about, then you're not. If you're not doing the thing that's being complained about, then let's just assume that that's not you that's being talked about. So if you are of any kind of ethnic group, of any kind of able group, of any kind of age group, of any kind of gender group that's being talked about, and again, there's nothing derogatory that should be talked about in any way, shape, or form, but somebody that's going through a process of 3 or 4 different things that are happening and they seem to see a pattern and they make a note about it. If you're not in that group, if you're not one of those people that's doing the thing that's being complained about, it's fair to assume that you're not the person that's being talked about. So to speak up and say not all, in one way invalidates what they're saying. But within our groups, can we maybe police the people within our groups that are giving our groups a bad name? So as a woman, if somebody's complaining about all women, rather than me say to that person, well, not all women, because I don't do that, which of course we all, I don't know if that's some kind of a weird human reaction that we just can't help or whatever. Instead say, well, I'm not one of those people. But if people from my group are hurting somebody in some way, and this has to be a legit argument. Obviously, it can't be a complaint based on somebody that's doing something that's subjective. But if there's something really wrong happening, I don't personally think there's anything women or men or any other group would do that's like trying to hurt other human beings on purpose. Most of the time it's some kind of an accident or misunderstanding, or somebody goes through a pattern of 3 or 4 people where they're dealing with the same issue. It does not mean the half of the, or almost half of the entire world is that way. I personally wish people would just not even have these complaints and put them in that way, but I don't think we're going to stop that. So, if you belong to a group and there are people within your group that are making your group look bad or that are doing something to hurt the reputation of that group, then I think we're better off focusing on those people and saying, well, I'm not going to put up with that. I'm not going to stand by and let somebody act like that, because I get lumped in with that and I don't appreciate it. So rather than get mad at the person complaining, I'm going to turn around and talk to my group about, hey, what the hell are you doing? You know what I mean? You're making this look bad for the rest of us. That's, what I mean by that. That's what I mean by othering, and that's what I mean by not all, right? And when we do get defensive and say not all, if we feel like we're being singled out, and again, that's another part of this I wanted to bring up. If you feel like you're being singled out, like, instead of responding, just sit with the fact that you think you're being singled out and ask yourself why you're defensive about it. And this is not to say that you're guilty of anything, but ask yourself what brought up that defensive response? What made you think you needed to be defensive about that? And then some soul searching around that. Is that something that, I don't know, something that happened in your childhood that made you feel that way? Or, did something happen to you in your last relationship, or you having a bad day, or whatever it is? Again, I'm not saying that because you're guilty or you feel guilty that you are, but if you're not, what's causing you to feel like you need to speak up and defend yourself in a group of people that's being talked about? So it would behoove us to try and turn around and say, well, there are bad apples in every group. Why don't we go and address the bad apples in the group that we're in, as opposed to defend ourselves to people who are complaining about the bad apples in our group? Maybe that's a better idea. Not saying anything is 100%, but that might be a better approach. And then one of my other isms would be, there are statements with feel, statements with seems, statements with I don't know, and how we interpret things that are happening. And I'm going to bring up my texting because of the way I am when I text people. I text people concisely and directly and honestly. I don't flower my words. I kind of say what needs to be said. There are people who will say, well, it seems like, and this is going to roll back to the last podcast where Melissa said that. If you say it seems like, if you say it feels like, if you say, I don't know, it just, things like that are feely statements. And those are statements that where there's a story. What your story is, nobody knows, but there's a story behind why you're making something that you're interpreting appear to be a specific thing. You're projecting whatever. So when somebody says to me, well, listen, it seems like you're mad at me the way that you're texting, most people would just be like, oh, no, I'm not mad. Don't worry about it. But I don't do that because that's not the way I am. I actually look at the statement you send me and I say, well, what about what I'm saying? Tell me what makes you think that I'm mad based on what you're reading. I'm all fascinated with what makes you connect. I'm upset with what you're reading me text. And on my end, there's absolutely no animosity whatsoever. I'm just texting. But the only difference is I'm not sugarcoating and writing sonnets while I'm talking to you. I'm just giving you the straight fact. And somebody will come back and inevitably say, well, it seems like it. It just feels like it. I don't know. It just... And I'm like, this is not an explanation to me. This is something that's coming from you. I can't help you with that. I can tell you what I need to tell you in a text. You can take that information and you can apply that information. But how you're getting that information or how you see it coming across or what you think I mean or do, that's all stuff I can't help you with. I could tell you that I'm not mad, but like the fact that you would think I'm mad out of nowhere, it's like, it's not logical. It doesn't make sense. Why would I be? Like, I don't do that. I don't text people in a mad way. Like, if I just weird. I don't have that type of personality where that's something that you have to think about when I'm talking to you in a text. It just doesn't even apply really to me. So it seems like you're sad, or it seems like you're upset, or it seems like you're busy. These are all things you're somehow grasping out of the blue sky because it's not something that's happening. And outside of me being curious as to why it is that you're assuming that this is how I feel, I use the word feel and I use it that way because it's some kind of an emotional projection. I can't relate to that, but I will at least once ask you, well, can you coherent, I don't say coherent, but I think to myself, can you articulate to me, like, when I say this and I send it and you get it, you read it, where does that come in? That you think I'm upset, I'm bad, I'm busy, I'm tired, whatever you think is happening. Now, maybe you have some sort of self-conscious fear that, like, I'm busy, or I don't want to talk to you, or you're bothering me. I can't do anything about that. And unfortunately, it's not something that I can control. That's all coming from your side. And I'm not trying to sound insensitive, but I'm like, I cannot predict it. I can't avoid it. I can't prevent it. There's nothing I can do about that. That's all on you. So if you hear yourself saying stuff like that, I don't know, it seems like this, I don't know, it feels like that, think about what you're saying and stop and ask yourself if you're not projecting something onto somebody else. And if you are, and I know people that do this and have anxiety and are doing that and know they're doing that, at least own that and understand that that's something coming specifically from your side. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, in my life, once or twice, I've gone through this where I've thought someone else was upset with me and it just turned out they were in the middle of some other thing that had nothing to do with me, but they weren't interacting with me the way I was used to. Right? Or maybe we did have a disagreement going on, and then at some point they got sidetracked with some other thing and just never got back to me about what was going on. And I assumed that, like, for all this time that I wasn't talking to them, that this was still about me, and it turned out to be some other thing. There's probably 3 things in my life, 4, that I can think of that all 4 of those people had no personal stake against me whatsoever. But in the end, I took it personally because, I don't know, I was just being an idiot about it. And in one case, it kind of sort of was personal to me in the beginning, but it wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it was. And then that person fell on some kind of trauma, and event happened, and they just decided, they just got wrapped up in that event. And I'm not saying that they could have reached out and said something to me about it, but since we weren't really on speaking terms initially, they just never picked up the slack on that and went off and dealt with whatever it was that they were dealt with for however long. And when I look back at that, it's like, oh, you know what I mean? And so I'm just saying, all 4 situations that I thought were personal to me were not. Then the odds are that it's not what I think it is. And so I've learned, unless somebody says something to me straight out, I'm not going to take things personally unless somebody says something to me directly. And I have said this before, and I'll say it again. If I did something or said something that upset you or hurt your feelings or something, first of all, if you know me really well, you know that I wouldn't purposely try to lash out and hurt somebody's feelings. It's just not me. Secondly, if I have a problem and we need to discuss it, I'll approach you and we'll discuss it. That's the way I've always been. I would never really hurt you purposely. So if you feel like I hurt your feelings, you have to know that it's not something I would have realized I did or planned to do or anything like that. And if I don't address it right away, it's almost a guarantee that I don't realize it's happening. From that point on, I can't be responsible for something that I have no idea is happening. So I will tell somebody that I'm real close with, or people that I'm real close with, I don't care what it is, address it. Tell me that this is what's happening. I can totally step in and we can discuss it, and I can, we can go from there. And whether I apologize or I don't, or whatever the case may be, at first I have to know it. And if I don't know it, I can't address it. I can't speak to it. I cannot review it with you. I can't discuss it with you. There are people who will straight up swear that I should know better than to say something I said. And it goes back to Playbook in that first episode but the very first season we did, in the very first couple of episodes Dave and I did on Playbook, and how you were raised. And unfortunately, no matter what you think, there are people who were raised differently than you and don't have any idea whatever that thing is that you think everybody should know, nobody should say. That person maybe wasn't raised that way and has no clue that this is going on in your head. And that's something that most of us do. Most of us think the rest of the world lives by a rule that they should know, we know, and they should know. And I think we all have to drop that mentality because not everybody we know was raised the same way as we were. I mean, there are people who, it's stupid things like, there's a joke going around about putting raisins in potato salad. Well, I wouldn't want to see raisins in potato salad. There are people who think raisins in potato salad is an absolute atrocity. And if somebody does that, it's almost like there are people who attach feelings and personal offense to all kinds of things like that. And at some point, somebody will just think, I mentioned it before, I had a guy that flipped out over saying Happy Easter to me one year. Somebody I don't even talk to anymore, and it wasn't somebody I knew really well. But I got a lecture over saying Happy Easter. Instead of Happy Easter back, I said same. And it was like, you would have thought he was just like, nobody does that. Everybody says Happy Easter back. So something's wrong with you. And completely got offended by that. And I was like, well, I'm saying it back to you. I'm just not articulating it outright, but I'm giving you the greeting back. I'm just not saying it back in the way you want to hear it. Maybe it's manners. Maybe it's whatever you think it is that everybody should have. Don't get me wrong. There should be some kind of social construct and some kind of norm, but whether or not I say Happy Easter back in the way that you want me to, it's kind of not a big deal, or it's not a really huge hill to die on. So the sentiment coming back now, I'm not really hugely religious, and that's part of why when somebody says Happy Easter to me, I say it back. I say same, or what I may say Happy Easter back. I really don't pay attention to how I say it back because it's not something that I worry about as much as something else. That's my life. That's my playbook. That's the way I was raised. It doesn't mean I'm trying to offend you or that I have a problem with you or anything else. It's just the way I say things. Not to go crazy, but the war on Christmas, I mean, Happy Holidays came out of the fact that several people or several different types of religions celebrate holidays around Christmas, and all of them are different. So it isn't taking away from Merry Christmas so much as it's just making sure that you don't have to say, Happy Holidays or whatever you're saying, Happy Kwanzaa or Happy Hanukkah, or all the different things that you could say around Christmas. You could, I guess, stand there and list them off one after the other for 20 minutes. And somebody thought Happy Holidays would make more sense, not because they were trying to take away from one religion at all, but because they wanted to make sure that everybody was included. So it's a playbook. It's how you were raised, and it's what you think is important based on your family and your upbringing and the things that went on when you were a kid. They don't necessarily resonate with everybody you know. Everybody had a different childhood. So that stuff gets carried into your adulthood, and you at some point might be you get your nose bent over something that somebody does that you'll swear up and down was done to wrong you, and it was something that maybe they didn't think anything of, or they didn't ever even know was a thing, because in their household, in their family, it didn't come up. That kind of stuff needs to be discussed. And instead of telling them they should know better, you just kind of approach it from the understanding that they may not have the same upbringing you did. They may have a different playbook than you. That's okay. Your playbook is no better than theirs. Just because your playbook is yours doesn't make it better. It makes it better for you, and that's a different story. So that's something I wanted to bring up. And then I did want to say that I did make a comment once about relationships and how relationships or relationships that are wrong start from, people that may get together and may enjoy each other for a couple of months, and maybe at the end of it, they decide either they don't want to be alone or they're going to try to work on it, or whatever the case may be. But at some point, people are in relationships. A lot of people out there are in relationships with people that don't match them correctly, right? Do they think it's their fault? Do they think it's that other person's fault? Do they think that this is their life and the universe keeps handing them the wrong people, or whatever the case may be? But a lot of misunderstandings from what I've gathered, right, when it comes to dating and relationships, in my experience, and even some friendships, wishful thinking and politeness are the two things that create a lot of misunderstanding in relationships. There are people who want to be polite because they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And there are people who want something and hope it's the way they want it and will continue to hope for that because they're not getting any direct signal that it's not going to be that. I'm bringing up relationships and dating because that's really where it's more apparent. So if I meet somebody that I'm going to flip it, right? Because this is usually the opposite for me, but I'm going to flip it for the sake of discussion. If I meet somebody that I like, and I have the wishful thinking of, oh, hey, this is all going to be something. And who knows? Maybe I go out with this guy once. Maybe we talk or whatever the case may be. And he's the guy that's raised to believe that he shouldn't directly reject me for whatever reason. Maybe he was raised that way. Maybe he rejected somebody once and they slashed his tires. Who knows, right? Maybe he's a shy person, or maybe he's, doesn't like confrontation or whatever. And I like this guy, and I make it clear that I like this guy, but he doesn't really reciprocate. But he doesn't tell me no, and he leaves me in that little, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, in that little no-fly zone where you're not really a no, but you're not really a yes. And wishful thinking comes in on my part where I say, well, see, he hasn't said no to me yet. And then that's where, that the Greg Brent book comes up. He's just not that into you, where it's not directly being said to you, but you're not getting a no, but you're not really getting a yes. And you kind of keep going with it because you think, well, I want this to be something. I like this guy. I have a thing for this guy, whatever. And or so in this case, it would be me, let's say, that was doing that. And I can think of a couple situations where I was really, really young where this did happen. I mean, what do I know, right? I'm not kidding. I would probably had my feelings hurt as a lot younger, but to be honest with you, I've always wanted to have my feelings hurt as a default. If that's the case, hurt my feelings and get it over with. Like, I don't want to follow somebody around that doesn't have any interest in me. As time went on, I understood that indirectness to me, as far as I'm concerned, indirectness is, that's my no. I'm just not hearing it, right? But when you're young, you're like, well, I'm not hearing no. And they keep saying yes. They keep not saying yes to me, but they keep going along with this. On his part, he's trying to be polite. And he's trying to make sure that I don't get upset. I don't get pissed off. I don't retaliate. I mean, I don't know, because there are a lot of guys who don't give you a straight answer because they don't know how you're going to react. And it could be a million reasons why they're trying to avoid it. And because he's not telling me no, then I'm going, well, he's not telling me no. So that's, to me, that's a yes. If you're in one of those situations, and I've talked to several friends of mine, and I've talked to several people that weren't friends of mine about this type of thing. If you like somebody, if you have a thing for somebody, here's what I suggest. And it's maybe going to be shocking for somebody to do this, but I would say that you just, if somebody likes you and you tell them that they like you, it's not going to stop. It's not going to make anything worse, right? You can't, I'm not saying you can't say the wrong thing to somebody who likes you, because you can, but just declaring your interest in somebody, that gets rid of all of that, whatever. Now, if you don't like what you're going to hear back and that's why you're avoiding it, that's something to consider. If there's somebody in your life that you have an interest in and you're like, oh, I don't want to just tell them I like them, ask yourself why you're doing that. Like, just ask yourself why you're doing that. You should be able to just tell them you do. And if they like you back, they should be great, happy to hear about it, right? But that little ambivalence on your part about whether you should say something or not, is it shame? Is it humility? What is it that's keeping you from doing that? Is it pride? Is it you're afraid of what they're going to say back? Think about what you're afraid of when you're thinking about that. And I would say just say something about it. Now, there are ways to say something. And if you really like somebody, you obviously have some sort of idea what it is that you want. You may like somebody and they may just want to sleep with you. And you may not want that. And you may not just want that. And so, if you tell them that you like them and they think that you're throwing yourselves at them and you don't sleep with them, they're going to have to adjust their thinking. Just so I would say, if you don't think you can handle it and you think you're going to cave, call your friends and tell them that you need some support with that. But it's better to declare your interest and just find out. And I've, at least in my, like I said, it's not easy to do. I'm not saying it's easy to do. I'm not saying it was never easy for me. As I got older, it got easier just because you want somebody who is interested back. And if they're not, I don't know what's going on here. You're just like you're just like postponing the inevitable, so rip the Band-Aid and be done with it. Right. And that's whoever it is. You may not get back. Hey, listen, you may not get the mutual interest back that you want, but I personally believe that you have a choice. You can either never hear what you want, what you need to hear, or you could just go on for weeks torturing yourself over somebody that you're not sure they're interested or not. I also kind of sort of believe that somebody who isn't directly interested in you if you're not sure and there's an uncertainty and there's an unknown about it and you don't know where you stand and it goes on long enough, I think that's a disinterest. As far as I'm concerned, I would chalk it as a disinterest, because even on the outside chance that they are interested, do you really want to deal with somebody who's that passive about everything? That's not going to be a relationship I think that's going to be beneficial to you. So even if they are interested, they're obviously very, very indirect, very, very passive, and you're going to not get a lot done dealing with somebody like that. So you don't want somebody who's aggressive and who chases you down and all that. And, if that's not what you want, that's fine. But you want somebody that's at least got the decency to tell you yes or no and give you somewhat of a straight answer so that you have somewhat of an idea of the time frame that you're not wasting by walking around with somebody for weeks that isn't telling you the true story, right? So, and in little teeny bit of the fact that some people do like the attention. They know that you like them. They don't really like you back the same way, but they kind of like the attention. And is that fair to you either? You know what I mean? Sure, I can understand people love attention, and that can be a motive. But for the most part, is that what you want to turn out to be? Is just somebody that gave that person attention? Right? So I would say politeness and wishful thinking when it comes to the beginning of a lot of relationships. And some of these relationships do turn out to be serious, but they don't end up being the right relationship. There are people who polite themselves right into a relationship they really didn't want. But hey, this person's there, they're solid, they're this, they're that. And I've seen a few of these relationships turn into long term, but they never really are a matched relationship. There's always one person that's not getting what they want and one person that's not looking to give it, because they never really were that invested. But this person was loyal. This person was solid. They didn't have to worry about anything. I can't understand it because it doesn't make sense to me, but there are people who will get in a relationship with somebody because of those things. There'll be no attraction and there'll be no sexual interest and there'll be no even companionship interest sometimes, but they'll go along with it because it's somebody that is loyal to them, and they'll try to take that and make that into something, but it never really goes where it should go. It just never really turns into the full picture. And in the end, it's kind of a lot of time wasted, and you'll end up with somebody that you have to leave. There's an investment that goes in, and there's a lot of years or months or weeks or whatever it is go into this thing. And then now you have to dissolve something that you spent a lot of time on, which is another thing Dave and I have talked about, where it comes down to people that don't want to leave a relationship because of the investment they put in, right? We spend a lot of time with people in relationships we should have left because of the time we put in. Putting more time in doesn't make it any better. It just wastes more time, right? That I guess when you're in the moment, it's tough to look at it that way. But then I don't know how many people I've talked to that have had said to me after 20 years, I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. I can't believe I wasted 20 years of this. That's what happens. Investment doesn't make a relationship valid or viable or anything like that, right? So that is that. I'm going to wrap this up because this is looking like this is going to be a two-parter, but I do have a podcast coming up on grief. I just want to mention really quickly that we're looking at the 25-year anniversary of The Sopranos being released, right? So, and it's crazy to me that it's been 25 years, but every time they roll this series on HBO, I get sucked into it again. So I just have to say really funny. It's a really funny thing that I've seen it probably 10 times, but for some reason, once I start watching the episodes, it's I don't want to do anything else. I just want to sit and binge these episodes. They really stood the test of time in the sense that they're still so gripping all these years later. it's like, maybe it's because of the fact that, maybe because it's my generation or whatever. So maybe it's more exciting to me because I was there when it was out. But it really is like a series that, there's a few of them like that on HBO, like 6 Feet Under. For me, like Sex and the City, The Wire, there's some series on HBO that like are really good and like are legendary. And to me, like, yeah, The Sopranos is one of those episodes or one of those series where, I don't know, it just gets sucked right back in. As Tony would say, like, this rat fuck son of a bitch that I am, I can't turn it off. So yeah, even though I know what's going to happen, I'm still on the edge of my seat. I'm still like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Even though I've seen, it's the weirdest thing. But anyway, I got into one of the episodes for Tony's, when Tony's mom died, when the actual actress that played his mom had passed away. I think they maybe took 2 or 3 episodes where they digitally kind of put her in, which was very creepy. But anyway, and there was an episode of the funeral or the arrangements that went through when his mom died and that kind of thing. I did appreciate Tony Soprano because his mom Olivia was very, not a lot, I can't explain it. There was something about the relationship he had with her that reminded me of my own childhood and my own relationship with my mother. There was just something about that was pretty parallel for me as far as just like some of the tactics she had as a mother. And was she a narcissist? I guess, but she was funny enough, borderline, which is what we think my mom might have been. And so she said a lot of things that really triggered me and made me think of my childhood, and even, as a kid, but also as I got older, just some of the stuff that I dealt with, that family dynamic. I know it sounds really weird. The series is great. I love it. It's really good. It's a bummer that we lost Gandolfini because he's really good in that. And again, there's one episode about Tony's mom and her passing away and how they dealt with her death and all of that made me think of grief. So I'm going to do a little bit of an episode on that. That'll be the next thing you hear. And this is, no way, shape, or form an advertisement for The Sopranos, but if you haven't seen it, and I can't believe that anybody out there hasn't at this point, probably a lot of younger people maybe haven't. That's something you want to, check out. I don't know if they're running it. They are running it on Max at this point. It's not HBO, it's Max they're calling it now, but it's also, I don't know. I can't remember if they were running it on any kind of other streaming service. It's possible because sometimes they're affiliating with each other now. So it might be available outside of that. I know that they're putting a box set out for that. And I think there may be a way to download it or buy it or something online. But I think there's also going to be some kind of an anniversary box set as well. So, and I think they're going around some of the cast. I thought some of the cast members were going around and doing like radio interviews and that kind of thing. But it's a classic. It's a 1 in a million. It's a really good series, and it has a lot of good topics and, scenes and classic scenes and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to let you go now. We have a website, www.lanaanddave.com. I haven't mentioned Dave, but Dave is still around. He's just out of commission at the moment and should be back. I do not know when, so I'm not going to tell you, but he's not gone forever. So our website is www.lanaanddave.com. That's where all of our streaming platforms are for podcast. That is where all of our social media is. And we do have buymeacoffee.com/Lana and Dave, and it's a good place to go and buy us some coffee. We love it. So in the meantime, you have a great January, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.